I know you don't have a doctorate degree, but Dr. Murphy just sounds fancy. And I don't know why I feel like I want to say Dr. Murphy, but I know you just said call you Robbie.
Just call me Robbie, man.
Robbie. Okay. Robbie or Roddy?
Robbie.
Robbie.
Mm-hmm.
If me and you are first meeting, right? Which we all kind of first meeting a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In so many words, tell me who you are.
Robbie. I'm a believer. I'm a licensed therapist. I help heal people's minds for a living. And most of my work is just impacted by mental health, schools, community. That's kind of me in a nutshell.
And how long have you been helping people heal?
I actually started my career. First thing I did was I was a parapro for Muscogee County. I worked in a self-contained room for students with autism. And so that's kind of like the beginning of my career. And then it's just kind of evolved from that. I previously worked as a school counselor, did that for about 10 years up until November of last year before I just decided to take the jump and jump out there to be a therapist full time. So
collectively, you've been working with people how long?
Collectively, 2010, so maybe 16 years.
16 years you've been helping people heal. And how did you get into this? Like, what made you want to start helping people mentally?
So transparently, I failed out of college and I had to come home to work. And I was working for an after-school program at Clubview Elementary. And so during that time frame, I actually thought that my mom had suggested I work with kids. I was like, I'm not trying to do that. Ain't no money in that.
Yeah.
And so she suggested that I do that. So that was the job I got when I came home. Then I kind of sat out of school for a year to try to like reflect on what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so I briefly thought that I would go into education until I realized that I didn't really care about that part. I found that the parts that I found enjoyable about that job were listening to students just talk about their life, honestly, like, and ask for feedback, like, what do you think I should do through this, and what should I do through that? So it kind of evolved from that in a nutshell.
And now you do it all the time, every day, every second, every hour.
Not every time. I do set some boundaries here and there.
Okay, praise the Lord.
But not all
praise
day.
the Lord. Okay, praise the Lord. Okay, well, Murphy, Mr. Murphy or Robbie. Mm-hmm. I have questions here for you.
Okay.
And they all of them are surrounded by mental health. I think a couple of them are about ADHD.
Okay.
Which I think is very interesting that that's something that was interesting to you to talk about.
Okay.
Because we don't talk about ADHD enough, especially in the Black community. We don't talk about it enough. And then I'm curious to hear your answers, but I'm also curious to hear what the people say.
Okay.
So, as for our first official question.
Okay.
I wish I had a drum roll like button. I probably could put one on here, but I don't know. Okay. Why? I like the thing at the end. Thank you. Why do so many successful people secretly think that they're failing?
I think so. I see it a lot with clients. I think they're failing because how do I put it? The finish line is always moving. Like the finish line is moving. Like you talk about like when you get to here and then you get to the finish line and now there's a new goal. So you never actually complete the race per se. There's another thing to work towards. You don't even stop long enough. Most of us don't stop long enough to enjoy the fruits of our labor. Like, you know, you want to get out of school. You finally get out of school. Well, now we're discussing, now you need to find a job. Find a job. Now, okay, what's the next goal? Are you going to get married? Are you going to have kids? What do you want to do with your life? So I think the goals, like, not that ambition is something to be like that we shouldn't have in our society, but I think people are so future focused, they don't stop long enough to kind of like enjoy what's going on in their life.
And does that come from like, does that come from pressure to wanting to be, or somebody to want to be proud of you, or like where does that come from?
I think just it's kind of like how we define success in our country. Like You know, when you talk about success, you often talk about who's the richest, who has the most power, who has all these things that are, I won't say somewhat. Sometimes it is harder. It's harder to obtain for some people than others. You know, I will say that. And so I think like people want access to those resources, and so they feel like they want those things. They want the money, the fame. Like people don't often sit there and think about like sometimes the best part of your week is not like coming home to some big house. It's just that who was in the house, who did I spend the time with? Did you spend time with your wife? Did you spend time with your kids? It's just as simple as watching a movie. It doesn't always have to be as extravagant as, you know, being on a yacht in France.
Sure.
You know?
Well, I think social media plays a big part in what we can perceive to be successful and not successful. And that's such a cliche thing to say, but it is so true. It's so true. In our minds, we assume what we see is like the life to live or to strive for. But that's not always the case.
Yeah. I also think like it's so nuanced how people get to their success. You know, like sometimes we don't know the amount of work they had to put in. Sometimes we don't know, maybe they had to do some illegal things to get what appears to be successful to us, you know. So I think like context always matters, you know, like what are the sacrifices that most people are willing to put in to be there? Like, are you willing to sacrifice that? Like there are certain things that I'm not willing to sacrifice if it has to come at my family. Like how we talked about Dr. Murphy. Like I'm not willing to sacrifice that I want to be Dr. Murphy if that comes at the expense that when I do have kids, I'm not going to be able to spend as much time with my kids. So I think, you know, people just have to determine what matters to them, and that's how you choose your success.
Do you think you're successful at what you do now?
Oh, it just depends on what day you ask me.
What do your folks do? What do your mom and dad do?
Oh, so my both of my parents actually are retired. My mom is an accountant by trade, but she's currently working as an office manager in a local hearing aid company. Okay. And my dad is a truck driver. He recently retired too.
Okay. And so you were raised in a hardworking family, or what kind of family were you raised in?
Single parent household.
Single parent household.
For the most part.
Yeah, siblings?
I have an older sibling. I have older siblings on both sides, but my older sibling on my brother's side was my sibling that I was kind of raised up with. We had like a 13-year age gap.
Okay. Take me, what's your favorite car?
That I've owned or just in general?
Just in general. What's your favorite car?
I don't know. I don't really have a favorite car.
Oh, come on now.
A Maserati.
A Maserati?
Yeah.
What color?
I'm basic black.
Okay. Let's say that me and you are riding in this Maserati, okay? And we are riding down the street you grew up on.
Okay.
So if at this point, everybody's saying, "Oh, look at Robbie. He in a nice car." So you're the man at this point, okay? Take me or drive me through what it was like to be little Robbie.
Little Robbie was definitely a very hyperactive kid. So
really?
I was diagnosed. So the reason you asked about ADHD is also important to me because it's a disorder that I also have as well.
Same here.
And so I've been diagnosed with ADHD since I was in first grade, 6 years old.
Okay.
So little me was hyper, really imaginative, really playful. Then my older brother was murdered around 8. And that kind of like transitioned my life, made it more adultified, I would say. So,
that's a great word. I never heard that word before. Adultified. Okay.
Yeah. You don't get to live with the, I don't want to say delusions, but like the things that you know, the adults keep from you when you're a child, you know, like when you're kind of shattered into reality like that, it does change up like the level of your innocence.
You said you had ADHD. Which means, and you said that you're passionate about ADHD and what all that means. Tell me what ADHD stands for, and then tell me how can someone identify that they have ADHD?
So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And I will just tell you, the real way to know that you have it is really just go to either consult your PCP or a psychologist and do a full psychological evaluation.
Okay.
That's just the real truth. Now, you can have some symptoms, but there are also a bunch of disorders that mimic some of the symptoms mimic ADHD, which also kind of leads to people being misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all over the years. So I think when we talk about like people going years, it really is common in women more so than anybody. And just the reason it's so common in women because most of the literature or the research is about men, particularly white men, but just men in general. And so there's not a lot of literature about women and ADHD and how like the symptoms could appear to be somewhat different sometimes. And so I think you often see like very, very high, powerful women not being diagnosed because a lot of times the diagnosis only comes when you were struggling in school for most people. Like if there was some area they felt like whether it was socially or academically that you were struggling, that's when most people decided to intervene. But also depending on how you grew up, some people just said, he's just hyper, he's just active. So people rule out symptoms based off of different things.
Yeah. So I guess the question that everybody would probably be asking, am I weird because I have ADHD or is something wrong with me because I have ADHD?
So I think the biggest thing for them, like you do have to consider it more so what I see from most people is it's not a problem. There's an answer. I was struggling with all these things and I didn't know that there was somebody I could have sought help from because a lot of times the things that people with ADHD struggle, I struggle with time management or I struggle with that time blindness and I can't see like when I should get here or when should, like people are typically either really, really early or really, really late. They can't get in between because they can't figure out how much time they need to get into those things. And so I think the thing that I see for a lot of people with ADHD is, great, I have an answer to this thing that has been plaguing me maybe over the course of my whole life. And now that I know the answer, I can put some systems in place that make sense. These are some other things that other ADHD people have suggested. These are just some random things that me and my friends have had in conversation that we felt to be beneficial. But like now they have a guide. It's not an answer, but they have a guide. Like kind of like, okay, this has worked for other people. Let me try this and see if it works for me as well.
If we did a brain scan of someone without ADHD and someone with ADHD, what would be the major difference?
I think you see, it's been such a long time since I've looked into this. I think what you see is the non-ADHD scan is always trying to get those dopamine sensors to like you're always looking for that dopamine fix, relief, that thing to kind of give you that relief or whatever. And so that would be the most different. I think you see like just the brain, the neurons are always moving around.
And so with someone with ADHD, what is it? What's the difference?
That's what you would see for the person with ADHD.
Okay, and the person without ADHD, it would be what?
I think it would be more simple, like more, if I can remember correctly, it just, it doesn't take as long for certain things to connect. Like, you know, those things connect, like the processing is typical.
They got it. But for people with ADHD, it takes a little while.
A little while, depending on what it is.
What's the biggest misconception about people who have ADHD?
That they're lazy. That they're like intentionally trying to not do this thing that people want them to do. A lot of times people talk about like having task paralysis, like being paralyzed with the fear of like, I don't want to do this task. Or a lot of times what it is it's not even that they're incapable. Like, I'm just afraid that I'm going to do this wrong. And then I have to deal with the consequences of doing it wrong. So they choose not to do at all. Because if I don't do it, it's not wrong.
How can someone look extremely successful on the outside but feel completely overwhelmed and stressed on the inside? How's that even possible?
People are really good at masking until they can't, until they hit that wall. And then it comes out in subtle ways. It comes out in your behaviors. Maybe the first time you raised your voice at your kid, or the first time somebody like, they didn't know what to do with that anger, so they hit a wall. Or if your gratification is food, maybe you start having more food than before. But typically, like, it comes out in small ways that may not even be noticeable to other people, especially if it's something that you've always done for stress. Like, a lot of people bite their nails. Like, that's just a normal thing for a lot of people. People don't ask questions about like, why are you biting your nails? Like, you know, we used to talk about that back in the day, like
Sure.
a sign of anxiousness and stuff like that. But now people just like, oh, they're just biting their nails. Nobody thinks about like what's the root cause of it. And so that would be a normal way, like that somebody who is maybe a high performer and might be able to hide the fact or mask it.
And why? Why is our first action when we are uncomfortable or stressed or overwhelmed is mask? Why is it not reach out for help?
I think because we still like we're rushing through a society that views mental illness as a weakness. You know, like I can admit that I'm struggling. I can admit that this has going on, but I also, you hear it oftentimes in relation to the military, but it happens in other industries too. Like, hey, I had this very, very emotional situation happen to me. I'm going to decide to take a leave of absence. A lot of times your company doesn't even know why you took the leave of absence. But then people take those leaves of absences. Now they're out of the running for promotions. Now they're out of the running for things that they feel like will ultimately benefit their family. And so because it's viewed still, quote unquote, as a weakness sometimes in our society, that doesn't make people exactly want to go, hey, I have this going on. They don't feel like their transparency is going to be received in the best way.
And so they just go farther and farther down into this hole.
Some people do.
And they don't make it out.
Sometimes they don't.
What is the solution? So
I think, you know, we have to consider like access to resources for all people. But I think too, like, to me, and these are my personal Robbie beliefs, but like I say, the biggest thing I think that impacts people when it comes to their mental health is their community. You have to build a community around yourself. Even people who don't like people, who will tell you they don't like people, really are searching for community. People, the problem is, like, you'll hear people say, I don't like people. But I also don't like that I don't like people. You know, like I recognize that I'm alone and I don't want to be alone.
That's a real thing,
But I don't like any of these people and I'm trying to like them. So I think in terms of community is the number one thing that kind of breaks you out of different situations. But it's not about just finding community in anybody. You have to find the right person.
How do you know when you found the right person to be a friend or to confide in? That makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's all through trial and error. Like, you learn enough examples of what friendship doesn't look like. You know, like people who intentionally go out their way. You know, like we all can fail at things about friendship. Like we may not always hold every secret, or we may have like opinions sometimes about people and how they live their life. And so people have to, it goes back to honestly establishing your boundaries, number one. But number two, like being clear, like what are your expectations of the friendship? Like what do you want this person to be like to you? What is their intention to do something malicious of you when you thought about it? You know, like, because a lot of times people's intentions aren't malicious. A lot of times people are dealing with their own traumatic responses to whatever their own life events are. And so sometimes you're just caught up in the wave. But like, you know, I think really evaluating people's intention. And sometimes intention doesn't matter. Sometimes I'm like, how did I feel about this? I don't like it. That's a firm boundary. Cut it off. You know?
Right. What if I don't know what my boundaries are? Because the common thread I always hear and notice, especially in young people my age, I'm 28, is that they don't know what they want, which means they don't know what their boundaries are. And they just get into relationships, get into friendships, start new things, and don't really know what they want at all. That makes sense?
It is very hard to establish boundaries when you don't know yourself, because that's what all of that leads to, is that you don't really know yourself. You don't know what your value system is or what things you should be doing. So I live with this with every client that I see. You are the architect of your entire life. You get to design the life you want. This disorder doesn't get to say that you have to live a certain kind of life. This anxiety, depression doesn't decide what kind of life. You get to decide what kind of life you want to live. Now, even with those things being said, like the anxiety, depression, am I saying you're not going to have hardships in your life? No, I'm absolutely not saying that. But you get to decide what your life is going to look like. And so people have to be intentional about like constructing, like, what do I want to change? What do I want to be different? And so, like you talked about, like not knowing how to set boundaries. You can't know how to set boundaries if you don't really know what you don't like to begin with. You know, should you probably be setting some boundaries? Probably, but you don't know where to start.
Well, as a therapist, how do I find myself if I don't know myself?
I think so. It's cliche. It's such a millennial answer, but I think journaling is one of the best ways to learn about you. Like, you are the foremost expert on you. Nobody will ever know you as well as you know yourself, because you are the only person with you for every single moment of your life. And so I think you have to start thinking of yourself as your own expert. Like, once you recognize that I don't know myself, a lot of times it's because we won't slow down to take inventory. Like, what things am I doing? Did this fill my cup? Or was I just going through the motions because I felt like I needed to?
Yeah.
Like, really slowing down to like really look at your life to make sure that you're being intentional about the life you want to live.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Why do I stay busy so that I don't heal?
Why do I stay busy so I don't heal? I think, again, short answer is healing is painful. Like, it's not always like, you know, like you watching your video game, your character healed, everything's magical. Like, healing is not like that in real life.
Right.
Growth is uncomfortable.
Right.
Like, having to become a version of yourself that is different is hard, especially. And some people try to say, like, be your natural self. But if you got people that have been masking their entire life, what is my natural self? I don't know who I am. And so when people have put on a mask for their entire life, like, yes, it's tiring maintaining this mask, but I also don't even know what it's like to not maintain this mask. So I think that part makes people not want to heal, because it requires that they have to be uncomfortable.
If they would only know that out of uncomfortability is great healing, then I'm pretty sure they would run to it.
Maybe. I mean, you know.
Is that the case for some people, though?
I mean, I think therapy has been around for a long time. People have their very different feelings about that. That's only one way to healing for some people. Maybe, you know, like, but a lot of times people are. I had was it a client or a student tell me what this one time? I think it was a student, actually. And that particular student told me, like, I don't know if I want my depression to get better, because all I know is this life. Like, I don't know what it's like to live another life. And that was kind of a mind transforming experience for me, because I never thought about that people found comfort in those cycles, because that was all they knew. I don't know a life where I'm happy, you know? And so, and then the other parts are, you get people who are clinically depressed, but they have pockets of happiness. And so sometimes when they have those pockets of happiness, they like, that sends them into an even more spiral, because there's like, I now know what it's like to taste heaven and lose it. And so now I don't know how to deal with that, you know? So I think those are some of the reasons. Like, growth is uncomfortable.
But it's required.
It is, but it is very uncomfortable. Like, I don't like for people to be in delusion about like what growth and what like therapy is. Therapy is hard. Like, it's easy to sit across from other people, watch TV, and talk about like what they got going on in their life and what they can do better. But like, for most people, when they go into therapy, I say this to every client, like, hey, you the superstar. I'm just the guy. I'm just here I am blessed that you allow me to take this journey in your life with you. But like, this ain't about me. This is about you. And for a lot of people, a lot of us are not used to experiences really being about us. And so that's uncomfortable. Sometimes this is the first experience I've ever had that has been completely about me.
That was big. That's going to resonate with a lot of people. I know that. I can feel that. Let's talk about men and mental health.
Okay.
Why do so many men struggle in their mind?
I think men are used to, number one, like, vulnerability is something we've not been raised with, majority of us. So it's something like we're consistently learning what does that look like. And does vulnerability, I always say this, in any relationship that you have, there has to be some level of vulnerability because that's what makes the relationship beautiful.
That's so good.
But, and learning to be vulnerable with people, I've also given them a weapon that can be used against me to harm me. That's the antithesis of how most men, if you think about sports, war, just battle, hunting, whatever it is, you don't give the enemy the weapon to be able to harm you with,
Right.
And so I think a lot of times, even in our friendships, men are raised to be competitors. Like we're competing for jobs. Hey, we all can't be CEO. I want to be CEO one day. So that means I got to show that my gift or my talent is better than yours so I can get the CEO seat. And so that's kind of a lot of the way that we've been reared. We've been reared to be competitors. We've not been reared in spaces to value community. And so we don't have community, or when we do have community, we talk about surface level things. Like we don't go in depth. Like it's very hard to have a conversation sometimes and be like, I'm struggling. Man, why are you struggling? Ain't nothing to struggle about. Get up. We got stuff to do. Like you got to do this job. You got to take care of your kids. That still don't negate that he was struggling though.
Yeah, and that's exactly to my next question. When a man says he's fine, what is he really saying?
Depends on the man, but I think a lot of times what they're saying is, a lot of times we don't want to talk about it because we're not used to. I can even think about being a kid, and I still do it now, even with my wife sometimes as somebody to like train. But I'm like, we'll talk about it sometimes. Like, how was your day? It was fine. Something crazy could have happened at school that day, and
but it
like,
was fine.
It was fine. Like it wasn't. Even, we don't need to talk about it.
How does one create space for a man to feel safe? And I say one because maybe it's a family member. It does not always have to be the wife to create space, but how does one create space for a man to feel safe enough to express what he's dealing with?
I think, for one thing, like, when men do express themselves, like it can't ever be thrown back in their face, like whatever it was, because it took a lot for them to get there in the first place. And a lot of times if you throw it back in their face, like they will never feel safe.
They'll shut down, yeah.
But I think that's the biggest thing, like to create safe space and letting them know that you're there, but not also emasculating them, because there's a very specific way a lot of times that men want to be addressed, but they don't want, I want you to support me, but I don't want to feel like less of a man for allowing you to support me.
Okay, break that down. Give me an example of what that means.
So, like sometimes like men can be having a hard day or whatever and stuff like that. I want to listen to you talk about my hard, like I want to talk about my hard day with you, but I'm not looking for you to fix my hard day and give me a bunch of ideas. Like, sometimes I just want to have that space to be able to empty it, and then let's move on. And
that makes sense.
And sometimes like people want to fix it, and like I want to fix my own problem, so.
Yeah. Is it different from how a wife makes space for her husband than a sister or a brother would make space for their brother? Is it different?
I think it can be different. Like, like your wife is your partner, so you share so many different spaces together. So I think, just for married people in general, like they have to be very intentional about how they comfort one another in general. And that's man or woman, because you also hold a lot of power to harm your spouse if it's done incorrectly too. So siblings are different. That's such an interesting dynamic.
Because they have history.
They have history. And sometimes like that history, your sibling could be your toughest critic, but they could also be your biggest champion at the same time. So
that's true.
It just depends on what that relationship dynamic is like in your household, or what it was like growing up.
What are the signs that my brother, or if I'm a wife, that my husband is struggling mentally and he's not saying anything? What are some signs I should be looking for?
Withdrawal. I think that's the number one way like men show withdrawal, not doing things that they like, not being able to like generate joy at all. Even in the small moments, like, does he have a favorite team? Is he watching his favorite team, or is he playing his video game? Even in terms of like how you guys interact together, like, men typically, this is so gender specific, but men a lot of times don't they don't really shy away from wanting to be touched or anything, like, especially by their woman that they're into.
That's true.
Love. And so I feel like when you're distant in that kind of form, like, that is a clear indicator that there's something wrong, and it just maybe that he's struggling.
Right. And where should I point him in the direction to be healed, or should I even point him anywhere? Should I just walk him through it, or at what point should I like get him help?
I think you have to notate so when it comes to seeking help, like, it has to be somebody's personal choice,
Yeah, that's a good
short
answer.
of us having some type of suicidal ideation, like, those are the times that, there's a crisis involved. We can, legally mandate that somebody, needs to be seen. But, like, you just saying that you're sad, like, that's not, like, enough to just say that, oh, I need somebody to be seen. So you have to invite them into the conversation. Like, I think you have to start by saying, these are the things I notated. Is this going on? Because sometimes, like, what we think we see may not actually be what we're seeing. And so they may have a different explanation for us.
That's true.
But invite them back into the conversation and be able to make it has to be ultimately their choice.
True.
You may have suggested it, but it has to be their choice.
True. In terms of masculinity, what does it look like? What does it look like when it's healthy as a therapist?
I think healthy masculinity is, and it's interesting because I feel like sometimes, like, for me personally, like, it goes back to biblical, but then I also think too, like, that can't be the complete root of our identity. And when I say that biblical, like, we talk about men being providers, and so sometimes, like, that's the foundation for that belief. But even that has its limits, because a lot of times what happens is men get wrapped up in the identity of just being a provider and don't see another identity. And so I think for men, I think it's healthy when there is diversity, I'll say. Like, and what I mean by diversity, like, different ways that you're showing your masculine, like, you don't feel like you have to subscribe to a specific lifestyle to be considered masculine.
Got it.
Like this, you're able
or
to
be this certain type, the shape or
Exactly.
size.
You're able to, like, okay, this is what works for me as a man, and I'm able to articulate that, and I'm able to articulate what does not work for me as a man. I think that's, like, when you're able to tell, like, when people are just comfortable with who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's an article I read probably a couple of months ago that said that there's like a 30 or 80, I think it's like 30 or 40% of men, probably more, that feel guilty when they rest. Why do men feel guilty when they rest?
We're in a productivity culture. Our whole society is about productivity.
Okay, what do you mean?
Like, American society is tailored towards productivity. Like, if you think about it, like, on your jobs, if your production is not good, you out of there. Like, that's just our country's culture. Like, whether we intentionally, we can go back and forth about what side decided on that, but that's kind of how our culture operates. It's about productivity. If you want to eat, you got to work. And, like, a lot of times we feel like if we're resting too much, then I'm not being productive enough.
Then I'm lazy.
And honestly, me and my wife talk about this. Honestly, we have to, at least as Christians, we have to take it back to Scripture, because God showed us what we're supposed to do. God showed us rest, but we ignore that over everything else. Like, we don't rest like we're supposed to, like, and we feel guilty about it.
Yeah, and then we get depressed or sad or anxious, or we get these certain ideologies about ourselves that are not true.
Absolutely.
Because you are not doing or treating your body how it should be treated.
Sleep will solve an abundance of our problems. Not all of them.
Really?
But, like, adequate amount of sleep will solve a lot of our problems.
Really? And you know that to be true as a therapist?
I know it from experience from my whole life.
Okay, but you're saying there's study out there that says that.
There are some studies out there that show that like sleep would resolve a lot of problems.
Wow. And why is that? Is it because we like...
So cognitively, you can't heal if you're not getting enough sleep. Like, so your brain is not even doing
Say that one more time.
Cognitively, you can't heal if you're not getting enough sleep. So your brain's not getting even getting the recovery time that it needs.
I've never heard that.
Really?
I have never heard that. And so sleep is a way of healing too.
Yes.
Robbie, I have never heard that.
Really?
Never heard that. And it's just because our brain just needs it, or like go a little bit deeper. What do you mean?
Your mind needs it needs to rest. It needs to sleep. It needs to recover and recharge.
Wow. Okay. That sounds obvious. I mean, it sounds like something that would be obvious, but I never thought about it in that way, that sleeping can also be a form of healing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What childhood messages about being a man create the biggest problems later in life?
I think young men are taught like early on to suppress their emotions. Like, hey, you're a boy, you're not supposed to cry. Like, get up and keep going. Like, and that's just it in a smaller example. And even with that, like, that's such a nuanced reaction, because I can always talk about like sometimes like, there are times where you're learning resilience, and there are situations in your life where you're gonna have to be resilient and push through. But like, I think overall, like that culture of like teaching young men to suppress their emotions is kind of like what happens. Like, it's not healthy. Like, it has to come out at some point.
Yeah, we gotta stop teaching our young man that vulnerability is a sign of weakness. We gotta stop doing that. It does no service to them. And it's definitely not doing service to their older self.
Absolutely.
We got to stop doing that. I don't know why. Maybe you can tell me why. I don't know. Why is that a thing? Why is that passed down through generations of men, that you can't cry, you can't show emotions. If you're sad, don't tell me. Just work through it. Why is that such a...
I think it's cultural, but I also think like, older generations, like, they were preparing for wars and stuff like that. Like, if you're in the military, like, you don't have time to cry. Like, you're about to be in a war zone, And so I think, like, as society has evolved, as life has changed somewhat, like, we're trying to get out of those things. I would tell you, like, when I was a school counselor, I did very much enjoy that my students, they had way more conversations about mental health than me and my friends or my peers had.
Wow.
Like, and they were very honest about, like, situations about their anxiety and things, and it was interesting listening to them talk about some of those things. I'm like, I can remember feeling anxious about that as a kid, and never talking about it with anybody. Just pushing it down, like, well, you still got to go. You still got stuff you got to do.
It's almost like we're trained as young kids, especially men, to push down everything that comes up.
Yeah,
and oftentimes, the result of pushing for so long explodes to anger, and then it becomes uncontrollable.
It could be anger, or it could appear in suicidal ideation, or it could appear in stroke levels because you're not able to manage your blood pressure, So it manifests in different ways, like just that suppression of emotion, I mean, and with all those things, it could be other health components, but a lot of times the trigger is stress and suppression of emotions. That's what causes everything else to be off balance.
Community and belonging is so important. And I don't think anybody can succeed mentally without having some sense of belonging or community. Why are we more connected through technology, but in a sense, we're lonelier than ever?
I think we kind of have grown. We have created a culture like we've kind of created a culture of convenience, because it is very convenient to be able to talk to somebody from my own house. I don't have to be uncomfortable or anything like that.
Yep.
But we also have kind of like, because we created that culture of convenience, we kind of have missed the mark, and we now like, it's still not the same thing as being in the physical presence of somebody, hearing them laugh or listening to their stories or their jokes and stuff like that. Even think about church, like, watching it online is not the same thing as being in in-person worship, And so I think people have removed some of these things and kind of have forgotten like where they came from and forgotten how they felt when they did have access to those things. Choosing comfort.
And so that's what it is. That's why we're lonely there, because technology gives us comfort and not a sense of belonging or community, in a sense.
It can, but then also too, like, you have the people who have made friends through technology that never would have met certain people. And I've heard the other side of that, like people who saying like, I've finally found my tribe. They just not here, so I think, it's...
Why quotation marks when you say tribe?
I don't know.
Okay.
I guess I can think of another word.
Okay. I thought you were trying to say that's not really your tribe because you're not around them.
You know what? I can't say that because somebody, you've never actually met them. Like, because people do feel like people...
They feel connected to people.
They feel connected and they have meaningful relationships and they talk about different things. And I'm like, I think too, what made me really think about it from a therapeutic standpoint, it's not the same type of relationship. But then I thought about, like, I have relationships with clients that we have developed over time. I'm never going to meet some of these people in person, but that doesn't make what we did together not any more important.
Right.
So who am I to tell these people that just because you've only met them online that this cannot have value in your life? Now, do I think it's important to go out and meet people in person?
Absolutely.
But you could have some value from these people you met online too. So
what are you lacking when you are relying more on your tribe online than you are physical people? What's lacking in the mind?
I think you are, I don't want to say lacking, but I think like sometimes it's just the area of and this is not to minimize anybody's specific thing, because people have very complex like disorders sometimes that make it hard to get out of the house, because depending on like your
social anxiety,
your phobias and things like that. So I don't want to ever like minimize somebody's struggle. But I also think there's a space too where you're leaning into comfort. It's hard to make yourself be uncomfortable. And sometimes it's not just as easy as like, depending on what you have, what presentation of what disorder you got, it's not as easy as just push them out. But for a lot of people, it's just that comfort. Like, I'm comfortable being at home. I'm comfortable being in my space, and I'm comfortable being able to communicate with you in this way.
Right. So, not that way.
Yeah.
As a therapist, what happens psychologically when someone doesn't feel like they belong anywhere?
Okay. And so psychologically, what happens when people feel like they don't belong anywhere, they feel outcasted by society. Sometimes they're prone to lots of severe mental health, the anxiety, the depression from being unable to build community, being able to build relationships. Because people often think that a lot of times that people who are standoffish, they want to be alone, but a lot of times it's the exact opposite. Like, I want to be in partnership and community with people. I want to feel those connections. I just don't, or we don't have enough similar interests and things. And so a lot of times what it ends up to them feeling like something's wrong with me, because why am I the only person on the world that feels like this, And
so how does one get help to feel that way? How do they just reach out to a therapist, or is it even that easy?
So they can reach out to a therapist. Some people believe in mental health coaching. I don't think you should go to mental health coaching for very severe, complex presentations, but like it can do for some mild anxiety, some mild depression. But typically you would go to a therapist. I think support groups are very helpful depending on what you have going on. I think finding other people that have like similar interests, like I think a lot of times what we think about that what we're interested in is so abstract that we're the only person in the planet interested in it. And a lot of times, like, there's a whole community of people that are interested in this thing over here. Do you like those people? Now, that might be the problem. You may not actually like those people, but there is a community of those people somewhere. Right. So I think it's just like putting yourself out there and trying different things.
Right. Can loneliness actually change the way our brains work?
For sure. Loneliness will definitely have you in spaces of sadness. It's hard to see hope and positivity when generally, what are the things where you're getting that hope and positivity from? A lot of times our connection comes from the other people in our life, whether we like to admit it or not. Like, it comes from the community we've built up. And if you don't have that, like, you don't have anybody pouring into you, it's hard for a lot of people to generate that on their own.
Why do people stay in friendships that are unhealthy for them?
You said it yourself. They don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to start over. This person, even though it's unhealthy, they know all about me. Now, if I meet a new person, I have to explain all about me to that person, and have the possibility that they may do the same thing that this other person did. Well, I'm just gonna stick with the old person because at least I know what I'm getting into.
Yeah, but that just feels like I'm asking to be heard.
You're definitely settling. I'll say that.
How do I get out of that mindset of settling for unhealthy relationships?
Learn to be uncomfortable. Learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You stay in that uncomfortability because you're used to
it. In terms of everything that we've talked about, which is mental health, what's the number one thing anybody who's watching should do to improve their mental health, even if they don't feel like they're struggling?
I think the number one thing people should do is kind of find that one person to be their accountability partner, like, through life.
Can it be a wife or a husband?
Could be a wife, could be a husband, could be a friend, parent. But find your person who's your person that you feel like you could be transparent with.
Can you have more than one?
Can.
Okay.
Sometimes this person may be good at this other aspect. Sometimes this person may be good at this. But find your people that you can, that you really feel like you can be vulnerable with. I think that's the number one. And if I had to pick a number two, honestly, I would pick journaling. I think journaling is such a good way for people just to get their own feelings. The thing of it is, like, you have all these racing thoughts. And, like, I told a client this recently, like, write it down. It doesn't have to make sense. Nobody else has to even see it. Like, write everything down, every single bit of it. You can go through it later and organize it and make it cohesive, but, like, just get it all. Like, it could be as crazy as, my wife made me mad today, my dad made me mad today, I wanted to slap them, blah, 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 blah. Like, as long as you're just writing about slapping them and not actually slapping them.
Right, I love that.
But, like, get it all out. What happens is we keep it inside and we let it fester. And so it's just in our mind going back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you just need to write it out. And write it out could be different. Like, I'm not going to keep up with a journal, but I'm going to keep up with my iPhone. So I type all mine out in my notes app on my phone.
Why is belonging the deepest human need? Why is it not something else? Why is belonging the deepest human need? What in our brains is, like, going on that we have to have belonging, or we feel like we need belonging?
Humans were created for companionship. It's just as simple as that. Even going back to scripture, like, Eve was created for Adam.
Yeah,
from the beginning. That's good. Like, we have always desired partnership. We have always desired to be in community with each other. And so I think it's just our basic natural need. Like, the other stuff, like, yes, some of those things we need more importantly to, like water and air to live, but, like, we want to be a part of something. We want to be in connection with each other.
I love this. This is such a great conversation. If someone feels completely alone today, right now, maybe they're watching right now, where should they begin?
It depends on what their need is. If you are having feelings of suicidal ideation, like you want to harm yourself, you can call that 988 crisis line. There are a couple of suicide hotlines that you can call, which I don't have on me right this second.
That's okay.
But also, too, depending on how bad it is, you can go to your local emergency room. They will make sure that you're taken care of. They will give you access to care. There are a couple of entities in the city that you can go to. The Bradley Center, for one, they will definitely make sure that you're somewhere where you'll be taken care of. a couple of private practices in town. Like if you're not necessarily in crisis, like you can reach out to any of the local therapists here. Like, and a lot of the times if they're full, they'll try their best to connect you with somebody who's not full. So,
Right. What are you saying to the person who feels completely alone and just let me say it like this, because I'm going to use both of these for reals. Make sure I say it right. What are you saying as a therapist to the person who's watching right now who feels completely alone? Wait a minute. Let's let that thing go off. Let me ask it again. What are you saying as a therapist to the person who's watching this video right now who feels absolutely alone?
Don't give up. There's more on the other side. As a therapist, I can't always tell you if it's going to be good or bad, but there is more on the other side. Let's keep pushing. You're the architect of your life.
Well, Robbie, I've had so much fun sitting here talking to you, and I hope and pray that anybody who watches our interview is encouraged, but that they go seek help. If anybody wants your specific help, what can they, or how can they contact you?
They can reach out to me via my Instagram or my website, www.boostyourlifecc.com, www.boostyourlifecc.com, or they can email me at robbie@boostyourlifecc.com.
Okay. Thank you so much.
It's great to meet you, man.
Brought to you by MSW Productions.